Aberdeen, Proving Ground, Maryland, May 12, 1942. The morning fog clung to the testing grounds as 5 distinct anti-tank armaments faced their ultimate trial, engaging a moving German Panzer III at 100 yards. The stakes couldn't have been higher. American airborne soldiers were being decimated by enemy armor across North Africa, their firearms ineffective against 25 tons of advancing steel. The British Piat Spigot mortar, weighing 32 pounds of cutting-edge engineering, fired first. Miss. The American M10 rifle grenade, supported by months of development and military contractors. Miss. 3 other designs, each approved by experts and representing the pinnacle of conventional wisdom, were next. Miss. 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 Then, a 24-year-old lieutenant stepped forward with what resembled an oversized drain pipe, sights fashioned from a wire coat hanger, and a homemade trigger. His design was so rudimentary that the Weapons Review Board had deemed it entirely impractical and too perilous to deploy. Edward O.'s audacious concept, dismissed by every expert. 5 projectiles, 5 direct impacts, impeccable precision achieved with improvised equipment that cost next to nothing to construct. By the close of the day, General Marshall would authorize the production of 5,000 units. By the war's conclusion, this once-rejected armament would transform lightly equipped paratroopers into tank-destroying forces that German panzer crews would come to dread. But first, one young engineer had to demonstrate that sometimes the most groundbreaking ideas emerge from the most unexpected origins. The war room within the Ordnance Department felt like a crypt. That spring of 1942, Colonel Leslie Skinner spread the latest intelligence dispatches across his mahogany desk, each document recounting the same grim narrative. In Libya, Rommel's Africa Corps was slicing through British formations with the efficiency of a scythe through a wheat field. American advisors embedded with Commonwealth units dispatched field reports that read like accounts of sheer terror. The arithmetic was simple yet terrifying. A German Panzer III weighed 25 tons and could maintain a speed of 25 miles per hour across desert terrain. An American paratrooper, burdened with combat equipment, carried 80 pounds and could manage a sprint of 8 miles per hour at best on flat ground. When these forces clashed, physics invariably dictated the outcome, and physics favored the Germans. Skinner withdrew a photograph from the engagement at the Gazala line. British paratroopers had been deployed behind German positions to interdict supply routes. The mission met with catastrophic failure when Rommel's panzers rolled through their defensive perimeter. The soldiers' anti-tank rifles, 39 pounds of meticulously engineered British weaponry, proved utterly impotent. Their .55 caliber rounds ricocheted off German armor like pebbles against a battleship. Of the 240 paratroopers dropped, a mere 37 managed to return to Allied lines. The walls of Skinner's office bore production charts that offered no solace. German factories were churning out tanks at a rate that outpaced American manufacturing capabilities. The Wehrmacht had mastered combined arms warfare in Poland and France, perfecting the synchronized deployment of armor, infantry, and aerial support. Meanwhile, American forces still adhered to tactics and equipment from the First World War, which had become antiquated 20 years prior. However, resting on Skinner's desk was something that offered a glimmer of hope, provided someone could devise a method for its effective deployment. The M10-shaped charge grenade represented a significant leap forward in anti-armor technology. The design by Swiss inventor Henry Mohaupt, utilizing a hollow charge principle, could concentrate an explosive blast into a focused jet of molten copper, capable of penetrating 5 millimeters of homogeneous steel. Laboratory tests confirmed the warhead's ability to pierce any German tank then in production. The delivery challenge, however, appeared insurmountable. At 3.5 pounds,
The M10 was far too heavy for accurate hand-thrown deployment. Rifle-launched versions, in turn, damaged the very weapons used to fire them. The only feasible method of employment necessitated infantry closing to within arm's reach of enemy tanks, a suicidal undertaking no commander would countenance. Lieutenant Edward Uhl arrived at Skinner's office on a Tuesday morning, fresh from Lehigh University's mechanical engineering program, attempting to appear unfazed by his first significant assignment. At 24 years of age, he possessed the kind of persistent, methodical approach that engineering professors admired, but which military bureaucrats often found vexing. His propensity for sketching mechanical solutions on any available surface had already elicited disapproving glances from senior personnel. Skinner presented him with the M10 specifications and a sheaf of rejected delivery proposals. "What we require," the colonel explained, "is a means to deliver this warhead onto German armor from 300 yards away, without endangering our own troops in the process. Every solution we've attempted either lacks sufficient range or poses an unacceptable risk to the operator." Uhl dedicated 2 weeks to dissecting the problem from every conceivable perspective. Rifle-launched variants generated excessive recoil, fracturing weapon stocks and dislocating shoulders. Mortar-delivered projectiles proved wildly inaccurate beyond 50 yards. Spring-loaded catapults appeared ludicrous and performed even worse than their appearance suggested. Each potential solution introduced new complications that seemed to multiply exponentially. The breakthrough occurred during a routine visit to the Indian Head Naval Proving Ground in Maryland. While passing the equipment disposal area, Uhl noticed a discarded 60mm mortar tube, essentially 5 feet of steel pipe possessing precisely the internal diameter needed to house the M10 grenade. Inspiration struck with crystalline clarity. Conventional rocket launchers failed because they attempted to contain the entire combustion process within intricate mechanisms. But what if the rocket motor completely expended itself before the projectile exited the launch tube? The operator would be shielded by the tube itself, negating backblast dangers. The rocket would emerge with sufficient velocity to maintain accuracy at extended distances. Working in a commandeered machine shop, Uhl affixed a pistol grip and a basic electrical trigger to the mortar tube. He jury-rigged a battery system using standard D-cell batteries and fashioned rudimentary iron sights from scrap metal. The inaugural test firing into the Potomac River surpassed expectations. The rocket traveled with remarkable straightness and accuracy, while the launcher remained intact and manageable. When Uhl presented his prototype to the Ordnance Review Board, the reception was frigid. Expert after expert found fault with the design. "Too dangerous to carry into combat," declared the small arms specialist. "The backblast will incinerate anyone positioned behind the operator." The armor penetration expert voiced concerns regarding rocket reliability. "These solid fuel motors are notoriously unpredictable. Half the rounds will likely misfire or detonate prematurely." The committee's consensus was swift. Adhere to proven spigot mortar technology. Let the British experiment with rocket launchers if they wish to gamble their soldiers' lives on unproven concepts. However, as spring transitioned into summer, intelligence reports conveyed increasingly urgent news. German reconnaissance units had captured British Special Operations executive equipment, including prototype rocket launcher designs. Within weeks, Wehrmacht engineers were reverse engineering these concepts, racing to develop their own versions. The technological edge offered by shaped charge warheads would soon be accessible to both sides unless America could field a practical delivery system first. The final evaluation was scheduled for Aberdeen Proving Ground in May. 5 established anti-tank weapons would compete against Uhl's improvised launcher. The victor would secure immediate production contracts. The vanquished would be relegated to obscurity. Uhl had one opportunity to demonstrate that conventional wisdom could be flawed, that elegant simplicity might triumph over complex engineering, and that a 24-year-old lieutenant armed with a modified mortar tube could revolutionize infantry warfare. The German panzers advancing across North Africa would not pause for bureaucratic deliberation. Ewell toiled 18-hour days in Skinner's workshop, transforming his crude prototype into a weapon ready for mass production. The original mortar tube necessitated significant reinforcement to withstand repeated firings. He meticulously wrapped the entire length with steel piano wire, creating a secondary containment system designed to prevent catastrophic failure, even if the primary tube fractured under stress. The electrical ignition system required redundancy. 2 D-cell batteries connected in parallel ensured reliable firing, even if one power source failed under combat conditions. The shoulder stock presented its own engineering puzzle. Initial test firings had generated recoil sufficient to bruise operators' shoulders and compromise aiming accuracy. Ewell carved a new stock from solid walnut, orienting the grain to absorb impact while providing stable contact with the operator's body. The wood's natural shock-absorbing properties proved superior to steel alternatives that transmitted every vibration directly to the shooter. But the rocket itself represented Ewell's masterpiece of practical engineering. He married the M10's proven shaped charge warhead to a solid propellant motor that burned completely within the 54-inch launch tube. The propellant grain design was paramount. An excessively rapid burn rate would generate dangerous pressures and destroy the launcher, while an overly slow rate would leave unburned fuel, posing a hazard to the operator. Following dozens of static tests, Ewell achieved the perfect equilibrium. Complete combustion occurred within 1/50th of a second, accelerating the projectile to 265 feet per second. The technical specifications that emerged would define infantry anti-tank warfare for generations to come. Total system weight, 13 pounds for the launcher, plus 3 4/10 pounds per rocket. Effective range, 300 yards with reasonable accuracy expectations. Armor penetration, 4 inches of homogeneous steel plate, sufficient to defeat any German tank's side or rear armor. Rate of fire, 6 rounds per minute with a trained 2-man crew, assuming an adequate ammunition supply. Aberdeen Proving Ground buzzed with unusual activity as the competing weapon systems arrived for their final assessment. The British Pat Spigot mortar arrived with an impressive lineage, developed by the Special Operations Executive, field-tested by commandos, and endorsed by Churchill's technical advisors. At 32 pounds, the weapon demanded considerable physical strength to operate its powerful spring mechanism. Its hollow charge projectile could, in theory, penetrate German armor, but only if the operator could accurately engage targets while wrestling with the weapon's unwieldy bulk. The American M10 rifle grenade represented an incremental improvement over existing technology. Standard infantry rifles could launch the shaped charge warhead using blank cartridges, equipping every soldier with theoretical anti-tank capability. However, combat reports from North Africa revealed critical weaknesses: insufficient range, poor accuracy, and warhead reliability issues that left infantry defenseless when they most needed protection. 3 experimental designs from established defense contractors completed the field. Each embodied sophisticated engineering approaches, backed by millions in development funding and decades of corporate experience. Complex fire control systems promised enhanced accuracy. Advanced metallurgy offered reduced weight without compromising structural integrity. Proprietary propellant formulations claimed superior performance under extreme conditions. Ewell's launcher appeared primitive by comparison. It lacked intricate mechanisms, exotic materials, or complex calculations for operation. It was simply a steel tube with a grip, a trigger, and basic iron sights that any soldier could readily understand. The weapon's inherent simplicity invited skepticism from experts accustomed to equating complexity with capability. The testing parameters established by Aberdeen's evaluation committee were stringent yet realistic.
Each weapon system would engage a moving tank target at 100 yards, a typical engagement range for infantry anti-tank operations. The target vehicle, a captured German Panzer III, would traverse the range at 15 miles per hour, simulating actual combat conditions. Each contestant was allotted 5 attempts to demonstrate accuracy and reliability. The morning of May 12th dawned clear and still, ideal conditions for weapons testing.
Uhl arrived early, only to discover that his launcher's sights had been damaged during transport from the workshop. The meticulously machined iron sights lay bent and broken in their case, casualties of rough handling by Aberdeen's logistics personnel. With only hours remaining before the demonstration, panic threatened to undermine meticulous preparation. Skinner arrived to find Uhl frantically attempting repairs with inadequate tools. "We need sights that function, not sights that merely look presentable," the colonel remarked with his characteristic pragmatism. Together, they devised rudimentary replacement aiming devices using a straightened wire coat hanger and a broken nail salvaged from the workshop floor. The result looked absurd: twisted metal secured with electrical tape, but it provided basic reference points for target acquisition. The assembled audience for the demonstration comprised the highest echelons of military procurement authority. Major General Gladian Barnes, Chief of Research and Engineering for Army Ordnance, would render the final decision on production contracts. Representatives from British intelligence services observed quietly, assessing American technological capabilities while safeguarding their own developmental secrets. Defense contractor executives watched with apprehension as months of design work and corporate investment faced practical evaluation. The stakes extended far beyond mere weapons procurement. German forces were advancing across North Africa, while American infantry remained inadequately equipped for modern warfare. Every day of delay translated into more casualties, more territory lost, and further evidence that Allied forces could not match Wehrmacht capabilities. The winning weapon would immediately enter mass production, potentially altering the war's trajectory in theaters where armor dictated battlefield outcomes.
Uhl checked his improvised sights one final time, feeling the familiar weight of the launcher settle across his shoulder. The coat hanger aiming device appeared ridiculous, but it offered the essential alignment necessary for accurate firing. More importantly, the weapon's fundamental simplicity remained unaltered. Point the tube at the target, squeeze the trigger, and watch the rocket fly straight and true. No complex calculations, no finicky adjustments, no sophisticated mechanisms prone to failure under combat stress. The test would determine whether elegant simplicity could prevail over institutional complexity, whether a 24-year-old engineer's unconventional thinking could resolve problems that had perplexed military experts, and whether American infantry would finally receive armaments capable of neutralizing German tanks. 5 shots would decide the future of anti-tank warfare. The British Piat went first, operated by a team of Royal Engineers who had undergone extensive training with the weapon at Woolwich Arsenal. The 32-pound launcher required both individuals to manage its intricate spring-loading mechanism, with one soldier stabilizing the weapon while the other cocked the powerful steel spring intended to propel the hollow charge bomb. The captured Panzer III commenced its traverse across the range at precisely 15 miles per hour. Its distinctive gray camouflage pattern was clearly visible against the Maryland countryside. The first Piat round was launched with a distinct thump, the spring mechanism releasing its stored energy in a single forceful motion. The projectile arced through the morning air, following a ballistic trajectory that appeared promising for the initial 200 yards. However, as the shaped charge bomb approached the moving target, wind drift and the inherent inaccuracy of the spigot mortar system became evident. The round impacted 15 yards short of the Panzer, kicking up a cloud of dirt and debris that briefly obscured the target vehicle. 4 subsequent attempts yielded similar outcomes. The Piat's spring mechanism proved difficult to manage under pressure,
requiring nearly 30 seconds between shots, while the target continued its relentless movement across the range. One round flew high, passing entirely over the tank's turret. Another struck the ground 20 yards to the left, illustrating the weapon's sensitivity to operator technique. The final 2 shots landed closer, but still missed by margins that would prove fatal in actual combat. The American rifle grenade team stepped forward with confident professionalism. Their M1 Garands were equipped with specialized launching attachments and blank cartridges. The system offered theoretical advantages. Every rifleman could potentially become an anti-tank gunner, and the familiar weapon platform required minimal additional training. The team leader, a seasoned sergeant from the infantry school at Fort Benning, had personally overseen hundreds of training exercises involving the M10 warhead. The first shot launched cleanly, the blank cartridge providing adequate propulsion to send the shaped charge grenade toward the moving target. But the fundamental limitations of rifle launch systems quickly became apparent. The grenade's ballistic characteristics were ill-suited for accurate long-range engagement. Following an unpredictable flight path that defied precise aiming, the round impacted short and to the left of the target, its shaped charge warhead detonating harmlessly in the sandy soil. Subsequent attempts revealed additional problems. The Garand rifle's stock fractured under the stress of repeated launchings. Its wooden construction proved inadequate for the forces generated by the heavy projectile. The sergeant's shoulder displayed visible bruising after 3 shots, impairing his ability to maintain a steady aim. The final 2 grenades landed closer to the target, but still outside the lethal radius necessary for effective armor penetration. The 3 experimental designs from established defense contractors performed with similarly disappointing results. Each weapon demonstrated sophisticated engineering and careful adherence to theoretical requirements, but none could consistently strike a moving target under realistic conditions. Complex sighting systems proved fragile and difficult to operate under pressure. Advanced materials failed to deliver their promised performance enhancements. Proprietary technologies that functioned flawlessly in laboratory settings struggled with the inherent chaos and unpredictability of actual weapons testing. By noon, the scorecard was devastating. Established anti-tank weapons, 0. Moving Panzer III, 5. Every expert-approved system had failed to demonstrate the fundamental capability required for infantry anti-tank operations. The observing officials began murmuring amongst themselves, discussing the implications of American forces entering combat without effective armor-defeating weaponry. General Barnes called for a lunch break, but his expression suggested that appetite was the furthest thing from his mind. British intelligence representatives conferred quietly, undoubtedly drafting reports destined for London within hours. Defense contractor executives appeared increasingly uncomfortable as their sophisticated systems lay silent on the range, defeated by the simple challenge of hitting a moving target. Ewell spent the break period conducting one final inspection of his improvised launcher. The coat hanger sights looked even more incongruous in daylight, their twisted metal construction sharply contrasting with the precision optics that had faltered throughout the morning. But the weapon's fundamental mechanics remained robust. The steel tube was adequately reinforced, the electrical system indicated a full battery charge, and the rocket motors had been meticulously inspected for defects. When General Barnes called for the final demonstration, Ewell walked to the firing line with quiet assurance. The familiar weight of the launcher settled naturally across his shoulder, its balance point perfectly positioned for stable firing. The makeshift aiming points offered basic reference lines that harmonized instinctively with his inherent aiming tendencies. The Panzer III commenced its rotation for the 6th occasion that day, its engine roar resonating clearly across the testing grounds. Ewell followed the target through his coat hanger sights, anticipating the precise instant when the target's motion, wind velocity, and the projectile's flight duration would converge. His fingertip found the electronic firing switch, sensing the familiar tension that preceded ignition. The inaugural projectile was unleashed with a sharp retort, its solid propellant motor expending entirely within the 54-inch barrel before the missile exited. The shaped charge warhead traveled in a direct and true line, maintaining a level trajectory that starkly contrasted with the arcing paths of prior munitions. Impact occurred exactly as Uhl had intended, at the central mass of the Panzer's chassis. The hollow charge warhead detonated with catastrophic effectiveness, perforating 50 millimeters of armor plating with a clean aperture. The observing assembly fell into a hushed silence. A single successful discharge proved nothing conclusive. Fortuitous hits occurred even with inferior weaponry. Yet Uhl was already preparing his second projectile, his movements fluid and rehearsed from weeks of diligent preparation. The Panzer continued its mechanical turning, presenting a novel angle of attack as it traversed the range. The second projectile struck the turret with equivalent exactitude, piercing armor that would have shielded the crew's compartment in a real engagement. The third projectile found its intended destination unerringly. The fourth achieved its objective with calculated precision. The fifth and concluding shot impacted the center mass, completing a flawless demonstration of accuracy that left no room for uncertainty or subjective interpretation. The official record now stated, Oh's improvised rocket launcher, 5 hits, moving Panzer 30. General Barnes proceeded slowly towards the firing position, his countenance revealing nothing of his inner thoughts. He lifted the rudimentary launcher, assessing its heft, and scrutinizing the bent coat hanger aiming aids that had guided every shot to perfect alignment. General Barnes shouldered the weapon himself, testing its equilibrium and ergonomics with the practiced motions of an officer who had personally evaluated countless weapon systems throughout his tenure. The launcher's weight distribution felt natural, unlike the cumbersome bulk of the PAT or the awkward mounting mechanisms required for rifle grenades. He sighted down the improvised coat hanger aiming device, observing how swiftly the rudimentary system aligned with potential targets. "It certainly resembles Bob Burns's bazooka," Barnes remarked, referencing the popular radio comedian's homemade musical instrument composed of 2 gas pipes and a whiskey funnel. The comparison elicited chuckles from the assembled onlookers, but the general's tone carried no hint of derision. The nickname aptly captured the weapon's unpretentious functionality, a tool crafted for purpose rather than ostentation. Barnes loaded a rocket and discharged several rounds at static targets positioned across the testing area. Each shot performed precisely as demonstrated: clean ignition, a flat trajectory, and devastating armor penetration. The shaped charge warheads pierced steel plating with surgical accuracy, creating openings that would have been instantly fatal to tank crews in active combat. More significantly, the weapon's operation proved sufficiently straightforward for any infantryman to master with minimal instruction. "How swiftly can you furnish 5,000 units?" Barnes inquired, his question slicing through the afternoon atmosphere with decisive finality. Uhl felt his heart leap. The transition from a successful demonstration to a mass production order occurred so abruptly that his mind struggled to comprehend the ramifications. "Sir," he managed, unsure if he had heard correctly. "General Electric will secure the production contract," Barnes continued, his decision already finalized. 30 days until the first delivery. We will designate it the 2.36-inch rocket launcher M1, but every soldier in the field will refer to it as the bazooka. The General Electric facility in Bridgeport transformed into a hub of industrial urgency, unlike anything the company had experienced since the Great War. Engineers who had dedicated their careers to designing electrical generators and household appliances suddenly found themselves producing anti-tank weapons en masse for global conflict. The transition from prototype to production line revealed challenges that laboratory evaluations had never foreseen. Quality control emerged as the principal concern. Early production models experienced catastrophic failures that would have proven fatal under combat conditions. Steel tubing procured from various suppliers exhibited inconsistent metallurgical properties, with some batches proving insufficient for the stresses of repeated rocket firings. The electrical ignition systems failed with alarming frequency, rendering soldiers with weapons that could not fire when German tanks approached their positions. The M6 rocket proved even more problematic than the launcher itself. Solid fuel propellant grains fractured during transit, resulting in unpredictable burn patterns that sent projectiles erratically off course. Humidity caused electrical contacts to corrode, preventing reliable ignition even when the launcher functioned correctly. Variations in storage temperature affected the shaped charge warheads, occasionally leading to premature detonations that killed operators instead of enemy tanks. By October of 1942, battlefield reports from North Africa painted a grim picture of the bazooka's combat effectiveness. American forces had received minimal training on the revolutionary weapon, treating it as just another piece of equipment rather than a system demanding specialized expertise. The M6 rockets proved so unreliable under desert conditions that the probability of an accurate hit dropped below 20%, even against stationary targets. Lieutenant Colonel James Powell's post-engagement assessment from the Kasserine Pass confrontation contained a damning indictment. The 2.36-inch rocket launcher has thus far proven ineffective against German armor in actual combat conditions. Out of 47 rockets fired at enemy tanks during this engagement, only 3 achieved direct hits and none resulted in confirmed vehicle kills. Recommend immediate withdrawal of this weapon system pending substantial redesign. However, amidst the deluge of negative reports, one military organization perceived a potential that others overlooked. The United States Airborne Forces faced tactical dilemmas that conventional infantry could scarcely comprehend. Paratroopers were deployed behind enemy lines with only the gear they could carry on their persons, fighting without heavy armaments, artillery support, or dependable resupply. Traditional anti-tank weaponry was prohibitively heavy for airborne operations. The British Boys rifle weighed 39 pounds. The American 37mm anti-tank gun required a vehicle and a crew of 6. The bazooka offered something revolutionary: genuine anti-tank capability in a package light enough for individual soldiers to carry. At 13 pounds, the launcher could be managed by paratroopers already burdened with parachutes, radios, ammunition, and survival equipment. The shaped charge warheads could theoretically defeat any German tank if delivered accurately to vulnerable points on its side or rear armor. Major General Matthew Ridgway, commanding the 82nd Airborne Division, submitted a formal request to Army Ordnance in November of 1942. Modify the bazooka specifically for paratrooper operations. The standard 54-inch launcher was impossibly cumbersome inside transport aircraft, where space limitations necessitated that every piece of equipment serve multiple functions efficiently. Returned to his workshop, he faced a new engineering challenge that seemed insurmountable. Paratroopers required the bazooka's anti-tank prowess, but they also needed a weapon that could be transported during airborne insertions without snagging parachute lines or creating hazardous protrusions that might catch on aircraft structures. The solution demanded maintaining ballistic performance while drastically reducing the weapon's dimensions. The breakthrough arrived through elegant mechanical simplicity. Uhl designed the M9 airborne bazooka to disassemble into 2 31-inch segments, joined by a threaded coupling mechanism. Paratroopers could carry the weapon components strapped to their bodies during the jump, then reassemble the complete launcher in under 30 seconds after landing. The breakdown system added negligible weight while resolving the fundamental portability issue, but Uhl pushed the enhancements far beyond mere field-expedient modifications. The M9 featured a longer assembled barrel, 61 inches compared to the original 54, providing enhanced accuracy through extended rocket acceleration. A new magneto-ignition system eliminated the battery failures that had plagued early production models.
Metal furniture replaced wooden components, reducing weight while improving durability under extreme conditions. Most critically, the new M6A3 rocket incorporated lessons learned from disastrous combat experiences. The improved warhead design featured a blunt tip that enhanced shaped charge effectiveness, increasing armor penetration from 3 inches to 4 inches of homogeneous steel. Extended burn time provided higher muzzle velocity and a flatter trajectory, improving accuracy at the 350-yard maximum effective range. By early 1943, the transformed weapon system was ready for its ultimate trial: combat deployment, with airborne forces preparing for the invasion of Europe. The pre-dawn darkness of June 6, 1944, carried the drone of 1,200 transport aircraft crossing the English Channel toward occupied France. Within the confined fuselages of C-47 Skytrains, 20,000 American paratroopers made final equipment checks before the largest airborne assault in military history. Strapped to their bodies alongside parachutes, ammunition, and survival gear, the M9 bazookas represented a tactical revolution that German commanders could not have anticipated. Staff Sergeant Mike Ranney of the 2nd Battalion, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, felt the familiar weight of his disassembled bazooka components pressing against his ribs as his aircraft approached Drop Zone A near Sainte-Mère-Église. The two 31-inch sections had become as familiar as his rifle during months of training in England. But this would be the inaugural combat test of whether Edward Uhl's design could transform lightly armed paratroopers into tank-killing specialists. The drop itself scattered American forces across the Norman countryside in a pattern that defied meticulous planning. High winds, anti-aircraft fire, and pilot inexperience deposited paratroopers miles from intended landing zones, creating small clusters of isolated soldiers deep behind German defensive lines. For conventional infantry, such dispersion would have been catastrophic. For airborne forces equipped with portable anti-tank weapons, it created opportunities that German defenders had never encountered. Ranney landed in a flooded field 2 miles east of his intended drop zone, immediately assembling his bazooka as German voices echoed across the dark landscape. The threaded coupling system functioned precisely as designed, transforming 2 unwieldy tubes into an operational weapon system in less than 30 seconds. Around him, other paratroopers performed the same ritual, forming small teams capable of engaging German armor without heavy weapon support from conventional units. The initial significant challenge materialized at dawn near Sainte-Mère-Église, where German reserves had organized a counterattack intended to reach the invasion beaches before Allied forces could establish permanent toeholds. 3 Panzer IV medium tanks, supported by infantry and half-tracks, advanced down the main road toward positions held by scattered elements of the 82nd Airborne Division. Under pre-war doctrine, lightly armed paratroopers would have been defenseless against such a force, compelled to retreat or face annihilation. Instead, Sergeant Ranney and Private First Class Walter Gordon positioned themselves in a drainage ditch 30 yards from the road, their bazooka loaded with an M6A3 rocket and aimed at the lead German tank. The improved warhead design promised 4 inches of armor penetration, sufficient to defeat the Panzer IV's 50mm side armor if struck at the appropriate angle. The lead tank passed their position at 15 miles per hour, presenting a perfect side shot that would have been unachievable with traditional anti-tank weaponry. Ranney triggered the magneto ignition system, launching the rocket on a flat trajectory that struck the Panzer's hull just behind the drive sprocket. The shaped charge warhead detonated with devastating effect, piercing armor and igniting ammunition stored within the fighting compartment. The tank halted immediately, smoke billowing from its hatches as surviving crew members abandoned the burning vehicle. The 2nd Panzer IV, attempting to maneuver around its disabled predecessor, presented its vulnerable rear armor to another bazooka team positioned in an apple orchard 50 yards from the road.
Private James Alley's shot impacted the engine compartment, disabling the tank's power plant and leaving it immobilized in the middle of the road. The third German tank, recognizing that the area was infested with anti-tank weaponry, reversed course and withdrew towards defensive positions closer to the coast. Within 3 hours of landing, American paratroopers had demonstrated a capability that fundamentally altered the tactical balance in Normandy. German armor, previously impervious to infantry assault, now faced lethal threats from soldiers who could materialize anywhere behind the front lines. The psychological impact proved as significant as the physical destruction. German tank crews began approaching any area where American paratroopers might be concealed with extreme caution. This transformation extended far beyond individual engagements. Near Carouges, a single bazooka team commanded by Lieutenant Richard Winters disabled 3 German tanks in 10 minutes, disrupting an armored counterattack that threatened to sever the causeway connecting Utah Beach with inland objectives. At Chef du Pont, paratroopers utilized bazookas to destroy 2 Sturmgeschütz 3 assault guns that had been dominating the approaches to a crucial bridge. The tactical revolution became evident in captured German after-action reports from subsequent operations. Wehrmacht commanders noted with alarm that American airborne forces no longer behaved like conventional light infantry, retreating when confronted with armor. Instead, paratroopers actively hunted German tanks, employing their superior mobility and knowledge of the local terrain to execute devastating ambushes against mechanized units. By the end of June, statistical analysis revealed the extent of this transformation. American airborne divisions in Normandy had destroyed or disabled 47 German armored vehicles using bazookas, contrasting sharply with 0 tank kills achieved by paratroopers in previous campaigns. The weapon's combat effectiveness surpassed all laboratory predictions. A 70% hit probability against stationary targets and a 45% against moving armor at ranges under 100 yards. The M6A3 rocket proved capable of penetrating the side or rear armor of any German tank, including the formidable Tiger, although its frontal protection remained impervious to bazooka assault. More importantly, the weapon's psychological impact reached far beyond its actual destructive power. German panzer crews, previously confident in their technological superiority over Allied infantry, now approached every engagement with the knowledge that death could originate from unseen adversaries. The standard allocation of 4 bazookas per airborne company and 6 per glider company provided American paratroopers with anti-tank firepower equivalent to a conventional anti-tank gun platoon, while preserving the mobility and tactical flexibility that defined airborne operations. German commanders trained to exploit the traditional helplessness of light infantry against armor found themselves facing an enemy that had neutralized their primary tactical advantage. However, even as the bazooka demonstrated its worth on Norman battlefields, intelligence reports conveyed disquieting news from the Eastern Front. German engineers, working from captured American weaponry, had developed their own shoulder-fired anti-tank rocket, the Panzerfaust, featuring an 88mm warhead capable of penetrating 6 inches of armor. The student was rapidly becoming the master, threatening to turn Edward Uhl's innovation against the very forces it was designed to protect. The contest between offensive capability and defensive countermeasures, between American ingenuity and German engineering prowess, was entering a new and potentially decisive phase that would determine whether the bazooka remained a revolutionary advantage or devolved into another obsolete weapon in warfare's perpetual technological spiral.